Hey everyone, Jake here for Extreme Terrain, and in this video we're taking a look at the ReadyLift 3-inch SST suspension lift kit fitting 2022 and newer Tundras without the load leveling air suspension, also excluding TRD Pro models. If you're planning to add some larger wheels and tires to your truck and want to give it a nice aggressive stance, this kit from ReadyLift is going to be just the ticket. This will give you 3 inches of overall lift and allow you to fit some beefy wheels and tires while also leveling out the stance of your truck. This is an effective, relatively easy installation, and it's one of the more affordable larger lift kits. Whether it's for aesthetics or the added capability, having a few inches of lift on your Tundra can make a world of difference. It's going to inject the truck with some additional height and clearance for bigger tires or off-roading. It's going to eliminate your factory rake as well. Now, ReadyLift says that this kit was designed to fit 35 by 12.5 inch tires. And as you can see on our truck, you will have enough clearance to do that without having to make other modifications. Now, if you're looking to go larger than 35s or with a really wide tire, you're going to have to get a larger lift kit or plan on doing additional modifications. It is also worth noting that due to their offset, the factory wheels can be used with this lift kit, but they're not recommended with a tire that is more than 10.5 inches wide. Again, you'll have some rubbing issues. What gives you the lift are effectively 2 sets of spacers, a front set and one for the rear. Now the fronts measure just about an inch or so in actual height, whereas the rears measure a full-on 2 inches. Now it's important to remember that especially for the front, suspension lifts are not necessarily one-to-one, especially when it comes to the height of the spacers. So the height of that spacer doesn't necessarily correspond to how much lift you're gonna get. It's all gonna do with suspension geometry. But this kit overall is still gonna give you 3 inches of lift up front and 2 inches of lift in the back. So that will again level out the stance of your truck and remove the factory forward rake. And they're designed to work in conjunction with these tubular front control arms that have brand new ball joints already pressed in. Now these are angled to accommodate for the extra height, so you won't have any issues with binding on the ball joints at full droop or compression, or really anywhere in between for that matter. Up front, you also get a set of bump stop extensions, and you've got differential drop brackets as well to make sure that you're going to be able to maintain correct suspension geometry and driveline orientation. Now out back, again, you get another set of spring spacers. These again are going to be fabricated just like the front ones, and these are 2 inches to give you that extra height. Also included in the kit again are those differential drop spacers. For the rear, you've got a set of shock extensions here, plus some sway bar and link extensions as well, again to make sure that everything is aligned properly. In the kit, there are also some brackets to relocate your brake lines, making sure that, again, nothing binds and everything works as it should. Now, it is worth taking a moment here to note that ReadyLift does recommend the accompanying Toyota lift axles for this kit if you plan to use the 4-wheel drive setting on your truck, just to avoid premature wear of the CV joints or binding when you get into some stickier situations. So if you are going to do some more heavy-duty off-roading or use your 4-wheel drive settings a lot, we would definitely recommend picking up a set of those additional axles. Now, spacers are a pretty simple thing, but it's important that they are done right. Both sets of spacers are made using heavy-duty stainless steel, and they are powder-coated to protect against rust and corrosion. The control arms are made from tubular steel with those new ball joints and bushings already pressed in, so they're ready to go and bolt right on in. On top of the ball joints, they also feature Zerk fittings, making for easy maintenance and longevity. The end link spacers, the shock spacers, and the bump stop spacers are also made from aluminum. These are gonna have a nice long lifespan too. They're not gonna corrode or rust. And much like your strut spacers, your differential spacers are also gonna be made from that stainless steel and that same black powder coating. You do get new bushings and all the other stuff that you need to get this fitted as well. And your shock spacers and your bump stop spacers and all those accompanying bits are made from aluminum too. So overall, this is a very well put together kit. It's pretty well made, and it should last you quite some time. You also get all the hardware you need too, so everything is going to be fresh and strong for you to use out on the street or trail. Pricing comes in at about $950, which makes it one of the more affordable 3-inch lifts on the market. Now, unlike some of the others at this price point, this does come complete with all the fixins and those nice control arms as well, making this a very good value. Only sacrifice you'll need to make, in fact, is some time. When it comes to installation, this kit will get a 3 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and the job will probably take you around 6 hours to complete. While installation is pretty straightforward, this is going to take you some time, and there's going to be some disassembly and a lot of stuff to just put together. So just be prepared going in. And as I always say, when you do a lift kit, make sure once you've got everything done that you go get a professional alignment so your truck tracks straight and true. But enough of me talking, let's head on out to the shop and we'll walk you through the process.
Tools required for this install include a couple different size impact guns, a ratchet, 8, 13, 14, 19, 22, and 24 millimeter wrenches, 12, 14, 15, and 19 millimeter ratcheting wrenches, silicone grease, a hammer and a rubber mallet, a couple different size extensions, a clip remover tool, needle nose pliers, a flathead screwdriver, a bungee cord, a 12 millimeter Allen socket, 19 and 22 millimeter swivel sockets, a swivel adapter, 10, 12, 13, 17, 19, 22, 24, and 39 millimeter sockets, a 1/8 Allen wrench, a pry bar, pole jacks or jack stands, and a ratchet strap. What's up guys? Today we're installing a lift kit on our Tundra, so let's get started. Now the first thing we need to do in the rear is remove all of the bolts holding in our brake line on our axle. We have one right behind the caliper, one next to the spring, one right above the fill bolt on the diff, and then the same two on the other side from this side. So I've got a 12 millimeter socket and we'll pop all these out. So now we're gonna start with the two closest to the outside, and then we'll do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll go back for the middle one. So now we can go back and get the middle one. Now next, if we look at the top of our axle, we have another bolt here that we need to remove. And if we follow this line up towards the upper control arm, we have one more back here, and then we'll do that same thing on the other side. So I'm using that same 12 millimeter socket to pull these two out. Next we have two more brackets to remove. Might be a little hard to see. We're at the passenger side upper control arm mount here. We have one here, and then we'll follow those two brake lines up to our last one right here. So we're using that same 12 millimeter socket again to pull these out. So now that we have our brake line bolts out, the next thing we're going to remove is our sway bar end link. Now this would be a good time to throw a couple pole jacks under your axle, or if you're doing this on the ground, a floor jack under the pumpkin, because we're going to start removing the stuff that holds the axle up. So I've got a 17 millimeter socket to pop off the nut at the end of our end link, and then we'll pop it out of place and do the same thing on the other side. Next, we're going to grab a 19 millimeter socket and remove our lower track bar bolt. Now this is the part where you're definitely going to want to have some pole jacks supporting your axle, because once you pull this out, the axle can shift. Next, we're going to grab a 17 millimeter socket and loosen up our lower shock bolt. Now we're not going to fully remove this for now, just loosen it up. And then do that same thing on the other side. Next, we're going to go to our upper shock mount and take a 19 millimeter wrench to remove the nut as well as our bushing. And then do that same thing on the other side. Now next, we're on the passenger side here. We're going to have to loosen up our rearward upper control arm bolt, and we're going to have to fully remove the frontward one. Now reason being is we're going to have to drop this axle, and this upper control arm is going to hit the gas tank if it's still connected. So we'll take a 19 millimeter socket and wrench to fully remove the forward bolt, and then we'll just loosen up the back bolt, and on the driver's side you're just going to loosen up both. You don't have to pull one out. Now next we can come to our lower control arm. We're just going to have to loosen up our two bolts. We're going to do that on this side and the other side. So I'm going to take a 19 millimeter socket And I'm just gonna loosen this up until the bolt starts to spin. So now with everything disconnected and loosened up that we need, we can start lowering down our axle until we have enough play in our spring to get that out. So twist it down a little bit on this side and then do it on the other side, lower it down pretty evenly until we can get our spring out. And now once we have this low enough, we can twist our spring and pop it out of place. And do that same thing on the other side. So now we can install our spring spacer onto our spring. Now there's a side with a lip that's gonna go down onto our spring, and then we can slide this into place. You might need to pull down on the axle a little bit to give you enough clearance to get this spring in. So now we're ready to slide our spring into place. I've got a second set of hands to help me pull down on the axle to get that last little bit of clearance that we need. Now next we can install our shock extender. So we're gonna have to pull our bushing off of our factory shock. And now we're gonna slide that on top. We're gonna thread it on until it bottoms out here. And then slide our bushing onto our extender. And then we're gonna take an 1/8 inch Allen wrench to tighten down our 2 Allen screws. Now I'm just gonna push down on our shock to compress it and then get it into our upper mount. And then you can repeat that process on the other side. Next we can install our shock extenders. So the first thing we're gonna do is pop this bushing off of our shock. And then we can slide this on top. And we're gonna thread that on until it bottoms out. And then we can slide our bushing onto our extension. And now we're gonna take an 1/8 inch Allen wrench to tighten down these 2 Allen screws. And then once we have that done, we're gonna compress the shock by pushing it down and get it into our upper mount. And then do that same thing on the other side. And now we can raise up on our axle using either your pole jack or your floor jack. And we're gonna raise this up enough so that we can get our bushing and our nut on the top of our shock. So now we can grab our upper shock bushing. On the bottom, we have this little lip that's gonna go down. And we're just gonna clip it in there. And then we can take our factory nut, thread that on the top. And then we'll grab our 19mm ratcheting wrench and tighten that down. Now if your shock body starts to spin while you're tightening down the nut like ours is, you can grab an 8mm wrench to grab the top of the stud here while you tighten down with that 19mm ratcheting wrench. And then you'll do that same thing on the other side. Next, we're gonna reattach our upper control arm on our passenger side. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this bolt out and then put the bolt for the frontward one back in. We're gonna have to manipulate the axle a little bit to get the other bolt in, and this one we have more access to, so it'll be a little easier. So I'm just gonna wiggle that out, and then we'll grab the bolt for the front and slide it through. thread the nut on. So now we can raise that up into our mount, and we're a little off center here. So I'm gonna take a 3/8 extension and slide that in to use as leverage to line up the hole. Just slide the bolt through. And now I'm just gonna grab a hammer and tap this through so that we can get our nut on the other side. So now I have a pry bar in the lower control arm mount on the axle. I'm gonna be pulling backwards to shift the axle a little bit so I can get that bolt hole lined up to get it through. And then I'll thread the nut onto the other side. And then you can take your 19mm socket and wrench, tighten that down. You want to make sure that you still have a load on the axle. I've still got the pole jacks there so that we can tighten this down under the load. Next, we can tighten down that frontward mount for our upper control arm. And now we can come to our lower control arm and tighten down our two mounts here. It's gonna be that same 19mm socket and wrench. And while we're here, we'll get our lower shock bolt all tightened down as well. And then we'll switch to our 17mm socket for our lower shock bolt. And then repeat that process on the other side. Next, we can come to our tie rod end and slide that back into place. We're gonna thread our nut on. And now with our nut in place, we can take a 17mm socket and tighten that down. And then do that same thing on the other side. Next, we're gonna come to this line that runs by our gas tank. We're gonna have to add these spacers to the bracket to drop it down a little bit. So I'm gonna take our bolt and put it through the bracket, slide the spacer on top, and then we can raise that up and thread it into the hole. And then we're gonna do the same thing where it meets the axle here, except we're going down. So we'll get our spacer on the other side. And then thread that in. And then we'll take our 12mm socket, tighten both of these down, and do the exact same thing on the other side. Next, we can reinstall all of the bolts into the brackets for the brake line running across the axle. Now the two on the outside are in the same place on the other side, and then this middle one is a little bit different. So we can lift our track bar up since we haven't put that back yet. Thread that bolt in. And then we'll take our 12mm socket, tighten all of these down, and then we'll do the same thing for these two on the other side. Now next we can reinstall our track bar into the lower mount here. Now the hole in the mount and the hole in the track bar don't exactly line up now. So I'm going to use a ratchet strap to pull the axle towards the driver's side so that we can line that up. So I've got one end of the ratchet strap hooked onto our lower mount here, and then I've got it going up to right behind this exhaust pipe. There's a hole in the frame that I've got the other side connected to. So I'm going to ratchet on this and get it to line up, and then we can knock it down into our mount and install our bolt. Now we can take a 19mm socket and tighten down our bolt, and then we can release our ratchet strap. Next, we can come up to the frame above our gas tank, and we have this brake line extension bracket that we're going to be installing with the factory bolt. So we're going to slide that into place. And thread our bolt in. And then we're going to take a 12mm socket to tighten down our factory bolt. And then we're going to take the supplied bolt and washer to thread into the nut on our new bracket. And then we'll switch to a 13mm socket and tighten this bolt down. And now if we follow those brake lines down, we'll come to our next bracket, and we're just going to reinstall our factory bolt there. And then we're going to switch back to our 12mm socket with a little extension to tighten that one down. Now, starting with the front, the first thing we're going to do is take a 12mm socket to pop out a couple bolts holding in some brake line brackets. So we're going to take a 12mm socket, we're going to remove the brake line bracket at our upper control arm, the 2 bolts on the frame here, as well as the one in the knuckle. Next, we're going to take a clip remover tool and remove our 2 covers here. Next, we can take a 17mm socket and loosen up our 2 sway bar mount bolts, and you're going to do this on both sides. Next, we'll take a 19mm socket and remove our sway bar bolt. Now, if you can't get that the rest of the way off, you can take a 19mm socket to loosen up this nut at the top of the end link. And then do that same thing on the other side. Next, we can twist to remove our bump stop. Now, this does have flat edges, so if it's a little too tight, you can use an adjustable wrench to get that off. Now next, we're going to loosen up our axle nut a little bit just so that we can have a little bit of play once we drop our knuckle from the lower control arm. Before we do that, we're going to have to pop off this cover. So I've got a flathead screwdriver and a hammer. I'm just going to work my way around until it pops off. Next, we're going to bend the tabs on our cotter pin to straighten it out and pull that out, and then we can remove this cover and get access to our axle nut. So I'm taking a pair of needle nose pliers to bend back these edges. And then you can grab the top and pull that out. If it's not coming all the way, you can grab it with the needle nose pliers and then hit the pliers with a hammer. And then you can remove the cover and we have access to our axle nut. And now with access to our axle nut, we can take a 39mm 12-point axle socket to remove our nut. Next, we can take a 22mm socket and wrench to remove our lower strut bolt. Next, we're gonna go up top and take a 14mm ratcheting wrench to remove our nuts. We're gonna leave a couple on the front here just to hold it until we're ready to pull it out. Now next we're gonna unbolt our lower control arm from the pivot points here. We're gonna need a 24mm socket and wrench. I've got a pole jack supporting the front of the hub here so that it doesn't fall. And I'm just gonna raise this up and disconnect it. You'll need to push this carpet out of the way a little bit on this side. And then with that out of the way, we can wiggle this down out of our mount. And then we can go back up top and remove our strut. So now with enough clearance to get our strut out, we're gonna go back up top and remove those two hand-tight nuts that we left and wiggle this out of place. Next, we're gonna raise our lower control arm back up into the pivot points, and we're just gonna slide our bolts through just to hold it for now. If you get stuck, you can use the pry bar. I'll just throw these on just a couple threads for now, just to hold it in place. Now we're gonna have to take out our upper control arm bolt. So we have some stuff in the way. We're gonna have to hop up to our engine bay, remove our air box so that we can get access to the module that we need to get out of the way. So we're going to come to the MAF sensor first on the driver's side, and we're going to press in the tab and disconnect that connector. And then we'll follow the wire down and take a clip remover tool to pop this clip out of place. And then I'm going to grab a 10mm socket to loosen up this clamp. And then on the front side of our intake box, we have a couple clips. We've got one here and then one here that's actually missing for us. So all you're going to do is just push that out of the way. And then you can lift up on your box and we'll get that out of our intake tube. Next we can grab our intake box. We're going to pull straight up to pop this out of the grommets. And then we can remove it. Next we're going to disconnect this connector right here, as well as remove our 3 bolts holding in the bracket here. So I'm going to take a 10mm socket and undo these bolts. And now with those bolts removed, we can come to our connector. We're going to push in on the gray tab and slide it out. And then I'm going to take a clip remover tool to pop this clip out of the body. Now this one back here popped out, but you're going to want to pop that out as well. Now we're going to have to disconnect all of the connectors on our accumulator here. We're going to pop all these out and then we can slide this over to where our intake box is at. So for the most forward one, we're going to press in on this tab and then pull backwards. And that'll pop that connector off. And then moving over here, we have this clamp that's holding these 2 wires together. We have a tab on each side. So we're going to have to push in on those and pull up. And once you pop that piece off and put that off to the side, and we're going to press in on the gray tab on our middle connector, pull that back, pop it out. And then for our back one, we're going to push in the black tab and then lift up on the gray. Disconnect that connector. And then we can maneuver this out of the way. We'll just set that off to the side here for now. So now that we have everything out of the way in the engine bay so that we can get our upper control arm bolt out, we can start removing it. We're going to start at the connection between the upper control arm ball joint and the knuckle here. We have a little cotter pin that we're going to have to pull out. I've got a pair of needle nose pliers to do that. And then we can take our nut off. I've got a bungee cord here hooked around onto the frame to support the weight of the knuckle so that we don't pull forward and pull on our axle. And now I'm going to grab a 19mm socket. We're going to break this loose. And then you can take either a ball joint tool to pop this out, or you can take a hammer and just give it a couple taps on the side of the knuckle to break it free. And then once you have that broken free, you can pull down on the upper control arm and fully remove your nut. Next we can grab a 22mm socket and wrench to loosen up the bolt on our upper control arm. And now I'm going to pop off that washer on the nut side. And then we can slide the bolt side out. We're going to put the washer against the bushing on the upper control arm to make it easier. And now you can repeat the same process on the other side. The only difference being on the passenger side, you don't have to remove anything in the engine bay to get the upper control arm bolt out. That'll just slide right out. So now the first thing we're going to install is our new upper control arm. I'm going to slide this bolt back into the engine bay where it came from, And then I'm going to connect it up while I have my upper control arm in place. And now I'm just going to tap the bolt the rest of the way through. And then we can get our washer and nut on the other side. So now we can go up and tighten down our upper control arm bolt. Now, before we remove this on our stock arm, the thread on the ball joint was sitting right on top of the knuckle like it is now. So we're just going to match up that before we tighten it down. So once you have that, you can take your 22mm wrench and socket and tighten this down. And now we can connect our upper control arm ball joint to the knuckle. So I'm going to pull this bungee cord out of the way. And then we have our nut that we're going to slide onto the threads here. And then I'm going to take a 19mm socket and tighten that down. Now next we can install our strut spacer. On the top here, there's a little notch. That notch is going to be facing out. Now on the top hat of our strut, we also have a mark that says out. So we're just going to line those two up. And then once you have that on, you're going to slide it about halfway. And then we're going to use the factory nuts from the top of our strut and thread onto the studs. And then once you have all your nuts on, you can slide it all the way down and twist those nuts all the way down. And then once you have those bottomed out, you can take a 14mm wrench and tighten those the rest of the way down. And then do that same thing for your other strut and we'll get these on the truck. So now we're back underneath the truck. We're going to pull these bolts out from our lower control arm so that we can swing this down and slide our strut in. And now the bolt on this side isn't coming out as easily, so I'm just going to take a pry bar to pry forward. And then once again, we'll just wiggle this out of our mounts. You can use a pry bar to pry forward if this one's getting stuck. So now we can take our strut and slide this into place. I'm going to get this into our upper mount and get our bolt started by hand. Now I'm just putting these nuts on a couple threads just to hold it in place. so that we still have a little bit of movement for our lower mount. Now next we're going to raise our lower control arm up so that we can get our strut into the lower mount, and then I'm going to slide the bolt through. Now I'm using a flathead screwdriver on one side to try to line up the hole so that we can slide the bolt through. And then we can grab a hammer and tap that the rest of the way in. And now I've got that washer and nut that I'm going to thread onto the other side, and we can just leave this loose for now. So now I've got a pole jack under each side of our lower control arm. We're going to start lifting this back up into the mounts so that we can get our bolts through. So we're just going to go up pretty evenly here. And now I'm just going to use a pry bar to line that up. Slide the bolt through. I'm going to have to lower on this side. And now you want this plate to be in between these two. So I'm just going to take a pry bar to get that to sit in that slot. And I'll slide that out of the way. And we'll get our adjustment nut onto the other side. Now we can go back to the top of our strut and take a 15mm ratcheting wrench to tighten down all of these nuts. And then while we're up here, we can throw our brake line bracket onto the stud on our upper control arm. And then we can install the supplied washer and nut. And then we'll grab a 13mm socket and tighten this down. Now next we're going to reconnect the rest of our brake line brackets. Now we have an extension bracket here for the frame. We're going to put this little ear in the oval hole and then thread our factory bolt back into the frame. And then we're going to take another one of our factory bolts that was used for this fitting on the brake line, and we're going to put that through. And then we have a washer and a nut in the kit that we can thread onto the other side. And then we'll throw our factory bolt back into the bracket going into the knuckle. And then we'll tighten that one down with a 12mm socket. We'll tighten the one going into the frame with the same 12mm socket. And then we'll tighten the last one with a 13mm wrench and 12mm socket. And then while we're over here, we can install our bump stop spacer as well as our factory bump stop. So this is just going to go up into the factory bump stop hole. And then we'll thread our factory bump stop into the other side. Now we can tighten our axle nut back down with that 39mm 12-point socket, and then we'll put our retainer cover back on as well as our cotter pin, and then the cover that goes over all of it. So now we can slide that cover back over, slide our cotter pin through the hole. Now, if your pin doesn't want to go back through, since it's not perfectly straight, you can get your needle nose pliers and grab onto it, and then just take a hammer and tap it through. And then we'll just grab the ends with the needle nose pliers, and we'll just bend those opposite ways. And then we can grab our cover, slide that into place, and then we'll just tap around it with a hammer to seat it in place. Next, we can reinstall our two covers to either side of our strut. Now we can go back to our lower strut bolt and take that 22mm socket and wrench and tighten that down. Next, we can tighten down our lower control arm bolts. We're going to be using a 24mm socket and 24mm wrench. And you're going to want the socket on the nut side here. Next, we can install our sway bar end link spacer. So we're going to slide this onto the sleeve here. Next, we can install our sway bar end link spacer. We're going to slide this over the sleeve here. And then you can pull down on your sway bar and line that up. And thread your bolt in. And then we can take a 19mm socket to tighten down our bottom and our top. And then do that same thing on the other side. And now with our end links installed on both sides, we can go back and tighten down our two bolts on each mount. So we'll take a 17mm socket to do that. And then do that on the other side. Now next we have our front differential relocation brackets. We have some bushings and sleeves that we're going to have to press in here. So I've got some silicone-based lubricant that we can use to slide those in. And I've got a rubber mallet if we need it, just to give it a few taps to slide it into place. So we're going to start off with the bushing. I've got a little bit of that grease I'm going to apply across the bushing. And then we can slide this in. And we'll flip it over and do that same thing over here. And then we can get a little more grease to lube up the inside here. And get that sleeve in. And now we're going to do the same thing over here on our other one. Just going to lube up the surface. And then we can lube up our bushing. And slide these in. And then we'll go one more time with the grease. Go inside our bushings. And then grab our sleeves. And now with those pressed into place, we can get these on the truck. Now here we're at the passenger side of our front differential, right next to the axle. We have this 12mm bolt holding this bracket on. We're gonna have to pull this bolt out. This bracket's gonna go from underneath this tab to over, and the bolt's gonna go in through the top. So we're gonna start off with a 12mm socket to pull the bolt out. And then we're gonna take this bracket and we're just gonna put it up on top of that. And then we're gonna put the bolt in from the top down this time. Now I'm just gonna tighten it down as much as I can by hand. And then I'm gonna grab a flex head 12mm ratcheting wrench to get on top of it and tighten it the rest of the way down. So now we can remove our two mounts holding our front diff to the frame. So we've got two 19mm bolts here that we're gonna start with, and then we'll get the 19mm bolt and nut for our first mount. There's also a good time to note that you're gonna want a pole jack or a floor jack if you're doing it on the ground underneath of here so that it doesn't drop on you. And then we're gonna keep that same 19mm socket and we're gonna add a wrench to the other side to get this one off. And with that, we can slide that first mount out of the way. Now I'm gonna switch to a 22mm socket to get these three, and then we'll go back to the 19 and 19 for this bolt. Now we have a little bit of movement, so I threw another pole jack in here in the middle just to hold it in place, and we'll keep removing these 22mm bolts. And now we'll go back to the 19mm socket and wrench and get our bushing bolt out. And then we can fully remove our mount. And now we can get our new mounts. I'm gonna go through these holes first before I get the bushing bolt in. And now since this bracket's smaller than our factory, we have a washer and a nut that are gonna go on the other side here. Now we can start to lower this down evenly. We're just going to keep lowering until we get our holes to line up. And then washer and nut on the back side again. We're gonna have to go down a little more still. And then we're going to keep going down until our bushing lines up. Get our nut on the other side. And now we can repeat a similar process for the other side. We're going to reuse our factory bolt in the bottom here. And then for the top, we have a Allen bolt with a flat washer that we're going to be putting in place of the factory bolt. So we don't really have enough room to get the flange on the factory bolt over the bushing here. So we'll thread that in, and then we just got to line up our bushing and thread our nut on. And now we can go back and start tightening everything down. So I've got that 19mm swivel socket that I'm going to use for this first bolt. And then I'm going to switch to a 12mm Allen socket. I've got a swivel adapter on this. It's for our top bolt. Now we can come over to the other side. We're going to be using a 22mm socket on the bolt side and a 24mm wrench on the nut side. And now we can switch back to our 19mm socket and wrench to tighten down the bolts going through our bushings. And then we'll do that same thing on the other side. So now the last thing we have to do is come back to our engine bay and reassemble the driver's side here. We've got to put our accumulator back, plug in all of our connectors, and then reinstall our airbox. So now we can grab our accumulator, put that back down into place. And then we can thread in those 3 bolts. And then I'll take a 10mm socket and tighten these down. And then we can start plugging our connectors back in. You're going to need these handles pulled all the way back to get it to go down. And then you can pull it forward to bring it down and lock that into place. And then we'll grab the next one. And then we can grab our clamp and slide that back over the wire and into place. And then we'll get our last connector. Slide that in. And then we actually have one more down here. We can click into place. And then we have these two clips that we can pop back into their locations. And now we'll get our air box back into place. We have these 3 posts down here, which are 3 grommets on the bottom of our air box are going to clip into. So we'll just line that up with the grommets and push that down into place. And then we can get the top. We have these 2 pieces that are going to slide into here. So we'll get this into our intake tube. And now once we have this into our intake tube, we can slide those into place, lay this down, and then we're just going to put those 2 clips back. Once again, ours is missing, but same thing, just fold that up, click it into place. And then we can reconnect the connector as well as this clip for our MAF sensor. And then the last thing we have to do is just tighten down this 10mm bolt to secure our clamp. So just make sure your intake tube's all the way on and tighten it down. So that'll wrap up this review and install of the ReadyLift 3-inch SST suspension lift kit for your 2022 and newer Tundra without load leveling air system and excluding TRD Pro. Thank you for watching, and for all things Tundra, keep it right here at extremeterrain.com.